And I think I've just lost my moderator. Where's Ginny? Oh, there you go. Okay, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Now, after the break, we're going to have our afternoon session. Coming up is the mental health support. This session will be moderated by Ms. Ginny Mok, OAM. She's a University of Malaya lecturer for 8 years. Ginny is now Foundation Principal of Asian Pacific Institute, a volunteer director of Multicultural Community Centre, and CEO of the Diversity Services, Brisbane. Ginny received the Premier's Multicultural Service Award in 1998, the Australian Centenary Medal in 2003, Lord Mayor's Cultural Award in 2006, and in the Queen's Birthday Honours List in 2013, she was awarded the Order of Australia Medal. She has served on the Federal Government Australian Refugee Resettlement Advisory Council, the Premier's China Council, Multicultural Advisory Council, and Council for Women, the Royal Children's Hospital District Health Council, Queensland State Library Multicultural Consultative Committee, etc. Currently, she is a committee member of the Chinese Museum of Queensland and Queensland Chinese Forum. She has written several government-funded books launched in Parliament, including The New Wave Multicultural Women Volunteers, Multicultural Trailblazers, Sherbro Dong Girls 2005, Ethnic Communities Council Queensland, a 30-year history, Tales of Australian South Sea Islander Women in 2016, the KDU University College, now Wollongong University, Penang, coffee table book, Metamorphosis. She is also a life coach, a cross-cultural trainer, and freelance writer for many, many international magazines and newspapers. Here we are welcoming Ms. Ginny Mok, OAM.
Thank you, Vicky. And before I proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land which we gather upon and pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Well, I'll join all the rest in congratulating QCF for organizing this splendid conference and in such a wonderful place. Now, aware of the pressures of time, I'll go straight into saying a few words about this mental health issues that we're going to be discussing today. Now, some of you may not realize that Australia is now the most multicultural nation in the world. Some people debate about that, okay? But we've got 48.2% of our residents here that have a parent born overseas, and that we've got 27.6% that are born overseas, and 17.4% who are Asians, and 24.8% speak another language. Some of you will also not realize that in the past 2-3 years, where we've had hot spots around the world, Australia is one of the countries that accepts refugees very willingly and looks after them very well. So we may not be aware that we've had, over the last 2 years, we've had Hazaras from Afghanistan, we've had Chins, Kachins, Karens from Myanmar, we have had Muslim Rohingyas from Burma and Bangladesh, where now we've had the Ukrainians. So our neighborhoods are so multicultural. You can go to a school in, Sunnybank, and then you still would have somebody from Eritrea and somebody from Ethiopia, not realizing that several years ago, Eritrea and Ethiopia were at war together. Or you'd have Sudanese people in some schools and not realizing that there was civil war in that country. And I think the important thing that we talk about mental health today, we have had references made to the pandemic, all right? The lockdown, the sense of isolation, and yes, that has led to a plethora of issues that have to be dealt with medically. But what about all these migrants that have come in? Many have not come in willingly, many have come in on a humanitarian basis, and that nearly all of them would be traumatized. That possibly when we talk about mental health, Asians, I come from an Asian community, and quite a number of Asians would say, you'd have to be raving mad to be classified as having a mental health problem. And this is an understanding that, and so many don't go to seek medical help in that psychological sector because they don't realize what actually is classified or recognized as a mental health issue. You don't have to be absolutely, crazy, but if you're stressed, if you're taking more than you should of sleeping pills to sleep at night, when you have panic attacks, anxiety attacks, these are all symptoms of issues that are classified as mental health problems. We have another problem at hand, and I hope we have a chance to talk about it today, in that to many Australians, health workers, and I will be introducing our two called culturally and linguistically diverse health workers to come to the stage, that many of the, I think, Anglo-Saxon white, where English is their first language, they're not aware of the patterns, the demographic patterns that are occurring at the moment, that the influx of all these varieties of different people that you'd never think you'd meet in your neighborhood, all right? And I mentioned them before. Now, are these health workers, we're not talking about other professions, but the other health workers who are so instrumental in getting these migrants and refugees settled down, being able to function normally, to have access and equity into all realms of life in Australia, are they aware of the political, social, economic details of their clients? I think, if I was Hazara from Afghanistan, and I went in because, I had panic attacks from all that bombing and everything else, and I went to a health worker. Would that health worker know that I'd just gone through that terrible war, that the Hazaras, are seen to be very different from the normal Islamic groups? All these kinds of details, I feel, and from experience, I've been told that lots of people don't understand. Lots of people don't even know. Now, it's interesting to note that according to the Code of Ethics of the American Psychological Association, that in 1992, mental health workers must be aware of cultural, individual, and role differences due to age, gender, race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, language, and socioeconomic status. If they didn't know this, if they worked with their clients not knowing these very important foundational details, it could result, according to the American Psychological Association, it could result in unfair, discriminatory practices, meaning they're not given the right treatment, they're not treated as they should be treated medically. Because if you don't know enough about your client, how do you respond to their needs? It also, the United States Institute of Medicine produced a book, Unequal Treatment, the title of which was Unequal Treatment 2002, that it revealed the critical disparities. There are lots of major differences in the quality of health care received by ethnic and racial minorities, and the fact that you needed cultural competence training. I'm just not talking about health workers. I think medical workers, I think legal professions, all those need cultural competence training to be able to ensure that the clientele that coming from these ethnic minorities are given good treatment, okay? Cultural and linguistic differences between the providers of health and the clients will result in significant miscommunication. If I don't know enough about you, I don't know about your language, if I'm working to an interpreter or translator, will I be able to share with you all the things that are necessary? And that increasing practitioners' cultural competence will result in patient satisfaction, treatment, adherence. They have found that when ethnic minorities go and seek psychological help, many drop out after the first consultation. They don't see it as relevant, they don't feel that the actual issues are being addressed, and so they feel it's useless, it's wasting my time, and they drop out. And that there needs to be often, I think generally most of the time, a greater level of information sharing. If I came to you with different issues, all right, and I didn't know much about it, I need you to explain to me what it actually is. You know, is it serious? Is it not so serious? What is available to me? All that is very important. And so at this point, I would like to invite our guest speakers for this afternoon to talk about mental health, and our seminars today have targeted, I think, empowering our clients, right? Empowering people from a culturally and linguistically diverse background. So, Bernice Chong and there's Evelyn. Now let me get your surname right. Evelyn Zhu. Would you please come up on stage and join me as we commence the forum? Okay, and we've got Evelyn Zhu here, and Bernice is over there at the third seat. And they've got presentations that they prepared for you all, and they're about 10 minutes each. But let me now go through and give you a very short summary of who they are and their accomplishments. So Bernice Chong is a registered psychologist with Assure Programs. It's a private business, isn't it? Yeah. She's a casual academic with the University of Queensland School of Psychology and School of Nursing, Midwifery, and Social Work. Bernice has over 10 years work experience in counseling, psychology, and mental health sectors. She sees clients across the lifespan, young people to seniors, with diverse presenting concerns. And these could include adjusting to life transitions, managing medical illness, dealing with relationship conflict or workplace issues, living with stress and anxiety. And hopefully I don't see you, Bernice, because sometimes I'm very stressed and anxious. She finds meaning and fulfillment in supporting her clients to overcome their life challenges, feel more energized, refocus on what is important to them, and rebuild lives. That is so admirable. She also does wellness coaching and supports clients who want to improve themselves and work on a particular health or mental health area in their life. Now for Evelyn, well, will you join me in acclaiming Bernice, right? And thank you for coming. And we'll move on to Evelyn here. Evelyn is a senior bicultural mental health clinician with Queensland Transcultural Mental Health Centre. And then is that a semi-government, government, or private? It is a government centre. And an advanced social worker with Division of Mental Health, Alcohol and Other Drugs in Darling Downs Health. Are you based in Toowoomba? You are, okay. She came to Australia from mainland China in 2013 to study social work, and has always been very passionate about promoting mental health and well-being of the CALD communities throughout her social work career. She has worked with NGOs, non-government organizations, and Queensland Health, and specialized in both clinical interventions and service development, She believes that empowering communities to gain awareness and knowledge of mental health is essential in breaking down the stigma and barriers for people to access appropriate service and supports. Outside of work, she enjoys traveling, exercising, exploring new cafes and restaurants, and spending quality time with her family. So now that we know a little bit more about you, and we have two accomplished participants, thank you so much for being with us here. It's very, it's going to be very, very helpful to a lot of people. And I think, Evelyn, you're starting off first. And Evelyn, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janice. Thanks. And I just want to say thanks very much again for QCF for having me here today. So today in the presentation, I want to talk to everyone about three things that are culture, acculturation, and mental health. And I explain why those three things. So firstly, about culture. By definition, culture is a way of life. And obviously, it covers all different aspects of our life. For instance, language, what we speak and how we communicate with each other. Wealth, what we do for living and how we use money to live our lives. Religion and spiritual, what we believe. Traditions, how we have always done things. Some are passed by generations. And history and politics. So what's in the past and what's now and what's in the future. And of course, our government and how our government lead the way in the society where we live. And there are many, many more other aspects of life that culture has significant influence on. So now, culture and acculturation. I want everyone to imagine an iceberg. And what we know about the iceberg is what we can see is only the surface of it. And there is so much more below the surface. So it actually applies to culture too, which is what we were just talking about, way of life. So what we usually can see on the surface is behavior, is how people act, how people behave. That's the outside of it. And then underneath that, there's so much more. That's attitude, that's values, that's our identities, our communities, and how we think about ourselves. So we call it component of culture. So people might ask, so if culture has such significant influence on all of us, why can't I feel it? So let's think us as fish, and culture is water. So that's why we can't feel it, because we live in it, and it's the environment all outside of us. And now, let's think about the scenario which I believe a lot of the people in this room today actually have experienced, is when you migrated from one country to another. And in most cases, it's from the country of origin, your home, to a different country. And that's when the acculturation occurs. So when acculturation occurs in adult migrants, a lot of times we experience this, what we call culture shock. It's all of a sudden we find everyone's doing things differently, and we have this understanding, may not be understanding at this stage, but we have this thought, oh my God, I can't believe that how I've always done things can be so different from everyone else. So that's when culture shock happens in the migration experience. I might need some assistance from my phone for this slide because I need to get the definition right. So that's the agriculturation definitions, and there are many different definitions in the academic world. And these two on the slide are the two that we, as mental health clinician, we feel are the most accurate. The first one is agriculturation comprehends those phenomena which result when groups of individuals having different cultures come into continuous first-hand contact with subsequent changes in the original culture patterns of either or both groups. It's a bit difficult to understand, I must say. The second one might be a bit easier. Agriculturation is the due process of cultural and psychological changes that takes place as a result of contact between two or more cultural groups and their individual members. So when we talk about agriculturation, after what we know what it means, so what it means to us in our daily life. So the Dr. J.W. Barry has suggested that there are 4 possible stages or outcomes of agriculturation process. And it is a fluid process that can last lifetime. And again, this theory is only one theory of the many. So let's quickly look at what are those 4 strategies or stages. Just to keep in mind, we're talking from 2 different angles. One is the receiving society, that's the country you're moving to, and one is the arriving individuals and the communities, means ourselves as migrants. So the first one, again, for the receiving society, the first one is called melting pot. It's when you come in, doesn't matter where you're from, you become one of us. You do things how we do it. You melt it in the big pot. It's assimilation. So it's melting pot. The second one is segregation, or we can understand as separation. So you are from a different culture, you are you. And we are from this culture, and we are us, and we separate. We just do things differently. The third one is exclusion, or we can call it marginalization, is you are from your part of the world, you come into our country, but you stay kind of at the corner where you are, you don't come near us. And we do have other communities in this country, but that's okay, you just stay where you are at your corner, marginalized. And the fourth one, we call it multiculturalism or integration. It means, yes, you are from different culture, and we acknowledge that we are following different ways of doing things, but you are welcome to be part of us. You are not us, but you are part of us. It's integration. So let's look at what that means for the arriving individuals, for migrants. So we're looking at reject the home culture and retain the home culture. And also we look at accept the host culture or reject the host culture. And those 4 different stages still apply. So in the melting pot, it means for people, arriving individuals again, who accept the host culture and reject your home culture. You are becoming the new. And for the ones exclusion, that you reject your host culture and you also reject your home culture, you marginalized. And for the ones in the segregation or separation, they retain their home culture, but they reject the host culture. I just want to keep the things I've always done things. And also we have the multiculturalism, that's for people accept host culture and retain home culture. So what that means for mental health. So acculturation experience can be very different, and it can be very challenging, difficult, and very stressful. And such stress can last for a long time. And different acculturation experience and strategies can cause tension in relationships, for example, between couples, between parents and children. And then constant feeling being excluded, marginalized, disadvantaged, and discriminated against can contribute to mental health issues. And the last, I want to actually mention about very common myth of mental health. So first one, mental illness only happens to people who are crazy. It's a myth. People with mental illness are violent and dangerous. It's a myth. Seeking help for my mental health is showing my weakness. That's a big myth. I will be locked up if I go to hospital. Again, it's a myth. People with mental health issues are just lazy. That's a very big myth. Children don't experience mental health problems. Definitely a myth. And I can't help people with mental illness. Only doctors can. Everyone can help people with mental health issues. So I will pass it on to my colleague Bernie to talk more about mental health and how you can get mental health support.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Evelyn, and thank you, Jeannie, as well. Okay. Everybody, I'm going to include interactive components in this talk. So I'm hoping that you guys will support me in this. So we're going to start first by raising your arms, taking a deep breath, and let it out. Let it out. Shake it out. Shake it out. Okay, all the interactive components will be part of our mental health resilience stuff. Okay. Yes, thank you QCF as well, and thank you each and every one of you for being here. Okay. Help. Oh, thank you. If you guys want to take a photo, my email is there, so I can send you guys the slides. Yeah. And I just wanted to do a shout out to my friend, professional counselor Ting Ting. Yay! She did all the translations and she's brilliant. Okay, so mental health strain. Have you guys held a glass of water for a few seconds and it's okay, no problems? Have you guys tried holding it for 5 minutes? What happens? It starts getting really hard, isn't it? And then if you try and hold it for a day, yeah, that's right. You're going to drop it. You're going to have some injury. And so I want to share some of the experiences today that I've journeyed with my clients over these 3 horrendous years with COVID. And a lot of them have felt that they've been hit on all sides by mental health strain, and for 3 years. Yes, sorry, there's a lot. But essentially, they've had strain through different areas. So one of them is the personal load of living with COVID and coming out of COVID as well. So how many of you guys have family or friends who are elderly? Raise your hands. Keep your hands up if you have family or friends who have chronic illness. Yes. So we worry about them, and it's a constant worry. As an example, there's lots of uncertainty that goes around with that. If we jump to work stress as well, who's had to transition to working from home? Yep. And who's had to look after children during the lockdown period? Yep. So all of this adds up. And we're also worried about the impact that COVID has on our kids as well. Yeah, in terms of their mental health. Family pressures, their financial, family dynamics. Okay. Who's had to spend a significantly more amount of time with their spouses because of COVID? Yeah. So a lot of clients could, you wake up, you go to work separately, you come back, you enjoy your spouse. It's different if it's 24/7, you have to be around your spouse. Yeah, I've seen people nod. That's right, there's stress there. And then worry about vulnerable loved ones. Oh, and grief is a very big thing. Grief is a very big thing because we've had people who's lost their loved ones overseas. Yeah, people are nodding. They couldn't travel over because of government restrictions. There's so much guilt involved in that as well. Yeah, and it continues on. Yeah. Oh, and who's with community fears? Who started using their phone a lot more? Oh yes, yeah. So we're seeing a spike, an increase in people on the internet, looking at lots of media and lots of media. So we've got government-related media, but also lots of misinformation as well. Yeah. Okay. Oh no, sorry. Thank you. Oh, that's my daughter when she was 1 year old. But the point in this is, if something hurts, let's say if a child cries, we ask what's going on. Do they need an epi change? Are they in pain? Do they have fever? So I like for us to do the same thing to ourselves. When we feel something is up or missing or distressed, ask ourselves, what's going on for me or my loved one? And these are a range of different possible effects that could come from continuous strain that we've experienced. So it could be cognitive difficulties. I can't focus. I can't concentrate. I can only concentrate on little things at a time. Constantly thinking about the fears, and this affects sleep. So people lie awake at night thinking about all the problems. Yeah, that's an issue. They are also more likely to be agitated, sometimes more easily agitated, some are more teary. And the thing is to look at difference. So what was the person like before, and has there been changes since then? Yeah. And then physical behavior, yes. And I find with my Chinese clients, they feel their stress a lot more. So it's not so much emotional, but they're more in touch with their body. They get more aches and pains, headaches, sleep problems. Yeah. And then there are also social effects where they start to withdraw from the community. Yeah. Okay. And so this is part of a snapshot of what goes on in counseling. So it's about trying to have a bit of a shift from why is this happening to me to what is this trying to teach me. So it's having that attitude of compassionate curiosity as to what is actually happening within me and how is that impacting me and my relationships. Yeah, and these are a snapshot of the different things that my clients have actually done and they found helpful. And okay, the interactive component, could you look at somebody right now and give them a smile? Look at somebody, I'm looking at you guys. Yes. Well done. Yes, that's right. And it really generates something within you. That connection is very important, and it really helps when we're in a crisis situation to feel like somebody cares. Yeah. Yes, and I love Mr. Rogers. Who loves Mr. Rogers? Yes. He says, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say, look for the helpers. And I'm looking at all the people, the lawyers, the police officers, the support workers. There are always people who are helping. Yeah, and there's lots of resources. So email me and I'll email them to you guys. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We can do this together.
I think if you would have a mic each, you've got a mic over there, right? Bernice. While you're thinking of questions, I think you would have lots of questions to ask. Because I know that during, the pandemic, the social isolation led to a lot of depression, led to a lot of anxieties. You've had people, and there's common talk about a lot of youth feeling suicidal, and many of them committing suicide, to the point where, that distress, anxiety has led to something extreme. While you're thinking of some questions that you like to ask, I'm going to ask Bernice one of the questions that we have down here, which is that for yourself, that, you see a lot of, I would assume, do you see a lot of Chinese clients? You do. What are some of the more important concerns that your Chinese clients bring to you?
Hello? Oh, okay. I find a lot of them are related to relationships and problems in relationships. With the strain of COVID, a lot of couples have difficulties to tolerate that. So they come like, okay, should we separate? Should we divorce? There's issues around that. Sometimes there's also parental relationship. How do I work with my teenage child who's worried about COVID, but also climate change? That's an up-and-coming issue as well, climate change anxiety. And also sometimes stresses within the workplace. Because in the workplace, you get more pressure and, upper management, middle management, there's a lot of restructuring going in place. And how do they manage change? And people are tired of change, which has happened a lot, yeah.
And related to, this, that you work in a private center, are the costs very high? I mean, is it covered by Medicare, or do you have to pay? What's the sort of average cost? Because I think quite a lot of people would be a bit hesitant to go to see a psychologist in a private practice, thinking that the fees could be quite prohibitive, could be quite expensive.
Yes, that's a good point. And I'll answer that. But another thing that my Chinese clients come to me about is because they went through crisis, and a lot of the time they're coming to understand what is important to them. They want to have a conversation around what are my values, and do I really want to live life in this way? So actually a lot come to me to talk about themselves. Yeah. Okay, so going back to that. So if you go to a GP, so a general practitioner, get a mental health care plan, you'll get a government rebate, I think about $80 to $90 for a generalist psychologist, and you get a rebate of $120 for a clinical psych. Most psychology businesses charge around $175 to $185, some more, $200 per hour, yeah. So, yes, cost is
So in
an
a
issue.
sense, it does work like Medicare.
Medicare, yes, they
Does
do.
cover it.
They cover
Okay.
10 sessions in a year.
All right. Thank you for that, and we'll come to you soon for your questions. But Evelyn, you're a government-backed center. Do you find that the problems that you face are slightly different?
Yes. Yeah. So I guess having worked in the public mental health sector, what we have seen more towards the severe side on the spectrum, and very often what we see when people have been trying to manage in the community without professional help for too long, and they really get to the point that they can't manage for any longer, and they will present to the hospital at crisis point. That's kind of how the public hospitals work here in Australia. So we see a lot of people coming with suicide attempt, a lot of people coming with overdose of sleeping pill, people coming with sometimes even the police involved because there's some violent behaviors kind of presented at home. So from the public point of view, we do see more from the severe kind of towards the severe end on the spectrum.
So, in a sense, then, quite a number of the culturally linguistically diverse clients have that anxiety that if they go to a psychologist, it's going to end up them being locked up.
Yeah, we've heard people asking that, and
But is that true? I mean, you've seen the severe cases.
Yep.
Do you then recommend that they go into a mental health facility where it, in a sense, acts like a prison?
So first, it's not true.
Not true? Okay.
Not
good.
locked up. In fact, majority of the people, as long as the risk, so I must say we assess risk first, and that's risk to yourself as well as a risk to the people around you. And in most cases, if it's caused by chronic stress, anxiety or depression, and the risk is not high, then you're voluntary. It means that you consent to the mental health treatment in the hospital. And that's even if we believe that you can't get appropriate treatment in the community. So we would suggest first, go to your GP, go to your family doctor first. And then if you can get a mental health care plan, go to see a psychologist like Bernie. And if that doesn't work, and if you really think about, I can't manage anymore, you can come to the hospital and we can help you to look at your options. So locked up is absolutely the last option we would ever consider.
Okay, so I used to sit on the Queensland Psychology Board. And you know that every psychologist has got to have 2 years of mentorship before they are registered, right? Yeah. So, you know, how many culturally and linguistically diverse psychologies, give me a ballpark figure, say perhaps even a percentage of practicing psychologists, say in Brisbane, are you very rare, as in, you know, you're exceptional?
Yes, we are rarer, yeah, for psychologists especially, but counselors, like our lovely Ting Ting over there, counselors, we have more diversity. So if we talk about mental health support, there is still a diverse group, but if you're talking specifically psychologists, there's not many of us, yeah.
That's right.
But I also, it's in my resources. I have some Chinese-speaking psychologists that I can share with you guys.
Yes,
too.
but I mentioned when I started talking that people where their languages, their mother tongue, could be Dinka, Amharic, Arabic, things like that. You'd have hardly anybody being able to treat a client like that with that sort of linguistic background. Is that correct?
I must say, kind of having the background from Transcultural Mental Health, which actually has a store here today, we have explored the resources in the community of psychologists or mental health social workers and counselors who work with interpreters. And we also, as a center, provide education to the community sectors how to work with interpreters to work with clients from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds for that exact reason.
Yes, although we do know, and I've been in the multicultural field for so long, that there is quite an issue with face. You lose face when you tell your problems, and these are intense problems, personal problems, and you've got a stranger interpreter, with you. And so, all these, we need to be telling a lot of the culturally linguistic diverse university students go into psychology. They need ones with so many, who are multilingual. So I would say that at the moment, we're in a very, very poor state, as in we do not have, culturally linguistic, multicultural linguistic psychologists that would really assist in making a client feel comfortable and able to share. Is that so?
Yeah, and I remember in your opening you mentioned about cultural competency. So there's definitely bigger, greater barriers for CULT communities and individuals to access mental health supports. So while we are kind of hoping to attract more CULT practitioners to come into this sector, we are kind of training the existing practitioners how to be more culturally responsive, be more culturally aware, and be more comfortable working with CULT community and individuals. That's a very big piece of work.
Bernice, you will have something to say?
Yes, so what I want to share as well is that some of my clients, especially those working in couples, we have more and more mixed couples. So you might have a Chinese lady or gentleman, but with Australian, Caucasian spouse. And sometimes they like to see Australian counselors or psychologists, so they understand the gaps better. Yeah. So it depends on the issue sometimes.
Okay, I'm aware of time. Do we have a few questions from the floor? Yes, get ready, put your hands up, and then, we'll make sure that your questions get answered. Thank you. Yes?
Hi. My question basically goes to the fact that there are a number of, let's say, Colombian and Venezuelan psychology practitioners in Australia who are yet to be recognized in their professions, who would be fantastic for their communities. And some of them end up offering those services on the side, under the table, because they're not being recognized directly to their communities. But is there a pathway for them?
I run a community center, and part and parcel of what we do often is to apply, to assist our clients who come in on the pathway towards a recognition of prior learning, and so recognition of qualifications. It's a long process, but the government is aware of that. Anything else that you could add to that? It is a very long process, especially it's medical, label medical. There is such, I think, reluctance, isn't it, to recognize qualifications from abroad. Sure.
Yes, I think it's a shame as well, like what you mentioned. And more work really needs to be done in that area. Yeah.
We have a question over there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ping. I'm coming from Gold Coast as Australia Chinese Women's Federation. So I do support a lot of Chinese clients on the Gold Coast across all Chinese board. So we do facing client having suicide, sending message to me, 2 a.m., 5 p.m. We do have a domestic violence client crying. So as a community leader from either Queensland Health or psychologist side, what is the basically we say 1, 2, 3 step, what the step you reckoned to our community leaders to first is protect ourselves, to be aware, of course going to have join the webinar today, and with our client very much on the Gold Coast itself, like Rajan saying, really, really hard to find lower rate, even under medical cover for our client to reach the service. Like the interpreter, with the culturally, they always step back. I have a client, like we keep referring with 2 years, if you don't walk step by step or you don't sit next to it, it's going nowhere. It's literally last 2 weeks, I have 2 clients very much saying, Ping, can you look after my 15-year-old daughter? My name is whatever involved with the C, I should return to C. So it's like, oh, I just know her 2 days to remember. It's terrifying for me if I'm not strong enough, not be able to continue support. So from your professional point of view as community leader or as how we can be support to our Chinese community, is like wider, or what we should do, even guide me to be reaching to the services, referral for more psychologists, departments, or like our first step, what we had to do, like raise our hand, a deep breath, some steps be useful for me, please. Thank you.
I guess from as a public mental health worker, the first thing I would say is to see what's your level of comfortable of kind of dealing with situation like this. The first, if you look at professional kind of step-by-step help, the first thing we always suggest is to suggest the person to go to the GP. Because GP are all trained, may not be like mental health, like a psychiatrist, but they are trained to respond in those situations. They can do a very quick assessment to see whether the person actually needs further public intervention, or it's kind of the situation where the person needs a psychologist or counselor who can actually address that issue. So that would be the first thing I would always suggest. And if it is related to suicidal ideation, which can be more severe and with consequences, obviously, from the public service, mental health call is the line that we would suggest to anyone who's suffering from any kind of mental health issues. And that would be an avenue you can kind of direct the person to as well. It will come up with the same kind of topic of interpreter. I must say that in all different hospital and health services, we have multicultural mental health coordinator who helps the mental health service to utilize interpreting services. So we'd hope that with the education and capacity building, the public hospital can get better and better in those kind of scenarios.
Do you have something to add?
Yes, and I thank you for the work that you do, and also to remember that when it comes to suicide and suicide prevention, it's not one person's job. So usually if we come to a psychologist, we would do a safety plan with them, and it would be to sit down with the young lady and go okay, what are your triggers? What are more likely to make you want to? Have you got a plan? And then you go through her thinking process, allow her to talk about it. And then say, okay, if you are, there's different levels. Like if I'm feeling 1, distress, I'm okay, I can ring this person or talk to if I'm feeling 3, distress, I will talk to this GP. If I'm 10, I will ring crisis hotline or suicide callback. So the family has a plan. The young lady has a plan of what she can do. It is her responsibility, especially when she's 15, there is some responsibility on her part to look after herself and her well-being. You are empowering her, you're giving her the power, and you are the support person. And we are human as well. So you have to look at your staffing as well, whether you are crisis or not crisis service. And so it's working as a team, with the family, with the young lady.
I think we have reached, there's still one person made the very last question from the floor, because our 2 dear ladies here have got the next session to do as well, right? So we won't tax them too much at this point. You have a question over there?
Yes, my name's Isaac. I'm from MCC, Multicultural Community Centre. I'm asking, can mental health illness be passed down from generations in our families, and how do we overcome that, if so?
That's a tough question.
Can mental health be passed down? Often lots of cultures say yes.
So the research has found that there's generic component to mental illness. Certain mental illnesses, for example, bipolar affective disorder or some types of psychosis. So there's always some generic component of it. So it really depends. And also, you carry the generic component doesn't mean that you would definitely have it. There's so much around environmental factors, the environment where you grow up and how you're treated in your family, how your family is treated in the society. So there's a lot influencing factors that can change, the generic component, what you may or may not kind of develop a mental illness.
Yes, I agree. And also, it's like a vulnerability. So, some people have cancer in their family line or diabetes, so there's a likelihood of it could happen. And so I think it helps then to especially look after yourself if you know you have a family history. And I find a lot of clients benefit from seeing, let's say if their dad or mom had it, how did dad or mom cope? And it gives them hope. Like, okay, they sought counseling support, or they take, healthy living, and it really helped them. And this gives them hope that, okay, if I were to get it, not that I will, but if, I also have a pathway towards getting better. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And would you agree with me that it's thrown a lot of light on some issues that we have not had opportunities, to talk about, question in the past? So thank you, Eunice, Bernice, and Evelyn. Would you all join me in thanking them for such an illuminating time? Thank you so much. And I think your next session will start in a few minutes' time. You'll have a little bit of a break so that you can go down and have a drink or something of that sort. Okay, thank you so much. You have been most informative, and thank you for entertaining that whole variety of questions.